Hello Internet, my name is Kiri and you're watching Curiosity, the vlog where we get nerdy on geek culture. Earlier this month, Player Piano joined the Geek and Sundry family and graced us with an amazing rendition of the Akira theme. Seriously, if you haven't checked it out yet, you really need to. Not only is it beautifully performed, but you're gonna see some familiar faces. Now, Akira holds a very special place in my heart because it was actually my first introduction to cyberpunk. So since we started the month with a little bit of cyberpunk flavor, I figured it'd be a nice way to end it too. Kind of bookendy. Out of curiosity, why do we love cyberpunk?
Side note, how many of you are completely psyched for Cyberpunk 2077? I mean, I've started reading the source material just to sort of satiate my curiosity, but I think it's making it worse.
What is cyberpunk? Over the years, we've seen many different flavors of cyberpunk, but there's still a few tropes that have become staples of the genre. The anti-hero. They must be dark, they must be broody, they must think the world's going to crap. Dystopia. The world must actually be going to crap. Or is already crap. Technology. Gadgets, cyborgs, hyper-connected population, shiny toys. In the wrong hands. Those shiny toys we love so much can totally be used for evil. Rage against the machine. Something is big and oppressive and totally wants us all to be robots and we have to fight it and fight the system. Style. If it doesn't require a backflip off a building while shooting your dual pistols, then it isn't worth doing. How did it start? The exact origin story of cyberpunk is pretty debated, but most sources can pretty much agree that it took shape in the 1980s. And we can kind of fill in some of the gaps by looking at history. So personal computers have sort of been around since 1964, 1965, with the Italian Programma 101. Before the Programma 101, computers were like the size of trucks. But while its compact size made it more accessible to the public, its $3,200 price tag did not.
Now bear in mind that in 1965, the American dollar was worth more. It was about equivalent to $7.50. So we're actually looking at about $24,000 for one personal computer.
It wasn't until a decade later that they began mass market producing it and thus making it available to a wider range of people. And in the 1980s, home computers were developed for household use, including software for productivity, programming, and games. The computer was even named Machine of the Year by Time magazine in 1982. And it became clear that not only was this new technology here to stay, it was going to become further integrated into our lives. Hooray, accessibility!
Meanwhile,
in a completely different ideological part of the exact same world, the punk rock movement was also starting to form, building its foundation in the late 60s to early to mid 1970s. Actually, its progressive growth was fairly simultaneous with that of the personal computer. And while the idea of fight the system was definitely alive and well in punk rock culture, it wasn't until The Clash that the world really had to contend with a punk band that was blatantly political. The Clash were joined by Dead Kennedys and Bad Religion and much more. The punk movement raged against the system. And God, was it a broken system. For instance, Americans had enjoyed a prolonged, widespread prosperity from the beginning of World War II to the end of the 1960s. This was largely built on the fact of the absolute supremacy of the American industrial industry, and it was a temporary consequence of World War II because of the destruction wrought on every other industrial power during the war. So it's really no wonder that we ran out of steam by the 1970s. This was also around the time where Richard Nixon was in office and that whole Watergate scandal happened, thus shocking the country and making a giant dent in American credibility with the rest of the world. By the time Reagan took office, the economy was sagging under the weight of a multitude of new structural challenges. So with new technology, a crashing economy, political unrest, and a musical movement that forsook the mainstream all coming to a head in 1980, it's really not hard to connect the dots of how we got to cyberpunk. William Gibson's 1984 novel Neuromancer is widely credited with being the defining work of the cyberpunk genre, in so much that it was originally argued that all similar writing should be referred to as neuromatics. While Neuromancer may be the bone structure of cyberpunk, genre itself is kind of an innovation. Many writers' works, especially those from the early 1980s, contributed into making cyberpunk the genre and subculture we recognize today, including how the name cyberpunk came to be. In 1980, Bruce Bethke had written a short story called Cyberpunk, about a group of unruly teenagers in a hyper-connected America. Cyber deriving from cybernetics, and punk, of course, pulling from the rebellious and disillusioned vibe of the punk rock movement. It was a term that really spoke to the heart of the genre. Bethke himself even spoke to actively trying to invent a term that grokked the juxtaposition of high technology with punk attitude. Little did he know what power that word would later have. Because once you can finally agree on what to call something, you can really start discussing it. You can define it and figure out its parameters and, consequently, you can replicate it. Why do we care? When Curiosity first started, I talked about how the fantasy genre was sort of a magnification of our hopes and fears. And I sort of feel that cyberpunk plays a similar role. When you think about it, cyberpunk is the genre that takes reality, or really reality as geek culture knows it, and magnifies our surroundings and our perceptions to the absolute fullest. The protagonists are often social pariahs. One way or another, they're outcasts. Geeks? We wear our weird on our sleeves, and while mainstream media has borrowed some of our trappings, I've noticed it tends to be more to mock us than celebrate us. Also, mainstream is a very fickle mistress, and if I may paraphrase Marian Call, we'll all still be geeks after nobody thinks it's chic. Technology is extremely prominent in both our lives and in cyberpunk.
I get uncomfortable when friends even suggest we go camping. I mean, no internet, no thank you. And who willingly forsakes plumbing? That's how society breaks down, and not in a good way.
As Tumblr will testify, geeks love to rage against, well, anything, really. I mean, The Machine, social justice issues, Stephen Moffat. And as cosplay will show, we are not lacking in theatrics or style. So while a lot of genre fiction may be categorized as geeky, cyberpunk was kind of made for us. What do you connect with when it comes to cyberpunk? Like it, subscribe it, share it, tweet it, tumble it. If you're looking for another genre of fine storytelling, I highly recommend Dael's Mythology blog. You can always find more of me on my personal channel, but until next time, stay curious.